As Jesus was making his trip into Jerusalem, right before he was going to go to the cross to offer himself as a sacrifice for our sins, Jesus met and ran into a wide variety of people. He ran into Jewish leaders who were trying to trip him up and to almost discredit him in front of others. He ran into people who needed to experience healing. He ran into those who were ostracized from the community, whether it was the Jewish community or just even the communities that they lived in. And once Jesus had interactions with them, they started to follow after him, waiting and watching to see all that he was going to do as he went into Jerusalem to what they thought celebrate the Passover, but in essence turned into Jesus buying the redemption for our sin as he gave his life on the cross. But one day as Jesus was traveling, he came upon the city of Jericho. And Jericho was kind of one of the last major stops that he made before he got into Jerusalem. And here he walked into town, and it almost was like there were just a whole ton of crowds around. It was like a parade in essence as he was coming in. But there was one guy that Jesus was destined to meet this day, and his name was Zachaeus. And Zachaeus was a tax collector for really the hated Roman government. But Zachaeus didn't just collect the tax money that was owed Rome. He actually was skimming stuff off of the people, charging them more and more taxes than what Rome was even asking them to do. And he was living off of that. Zachaeus, in essence, was stealing from the people that were around him, and they hated him for it. But on this day, Jesus came into town, and Zachaeus, being this small guy in essence, he's like, I got to get a glimpse of this Jesus. I've got to see what all this ruckus is. But he was too small to get through the crowds, and frankly, the crowds hated him anyway. And so what he did that day was kind of cool, and we tell it in a lot of children's stories. He climbed up into this sycamore tree so that he could get a glimpse of this Jesus who was coming in. But I find it very fascinating that this evil guy who basically was looking for any sign of hope that he could took a risk that day, and it paid off. Because as Jesus was walking through the streets, he looked up into the tree and saw Zachaeus there. He said, Zachaeus, come down from that tree, for I'm going to your house today. We're going to dine together, and we're going to talk about all these things that are going on. And I can just imagine that with these people who were following after Jesus and Zachaeus that day, that they would have had a lot of questions, because Zachaeus was the last guy they expected Jesus to come and talk to that day. Have you ever felt that you were so far lost that Jesus himself couldn't even find you? Right? That there was no hope for you. I think this is what Zachaeus would have been feeling that day. And yet, despite all of the sin, all of the hurt, all of the theft that he had done, Jesus wanted him that day. And so I wanted to come to you with this today, because I hear this often. Do you realize today that there is no sin that Jesus can't forgive? That there is no amount of sin. You cannot behave badly enough and commit something enough for Jesus not to offer forgiveness for you, because we are all wretched. We've all sinned and fall short of the glory of God, just like Zachaeus. But one thing we see from this passage is Zachaeus didn't give up. He climbed the tree. He sought after Jesus. And in their interactions in Zacchaeus' house that day, they talked about it. They were real. Jesus didn't glance over his sin, but he pointed it out. Zacchaeus repented, and forgiveness took place. And so as we're leading into Easter, I wanted to present that to you today. What do you need to experience forgiveness for? What do you need to take before Jesus right now so that he can just wipe that slate clean? Because friends, you can never sin so much that Jesus can't forgive. So I want you to think about that today, especially as we look into the Easter season. When we come to Jesus, he is standing there with open arms, ready to forgive, no matter how bad we've been.